You know that specific group of people who somehow remember a completely analog childhood but adapted perfectly to a hyper-digital adulthood. They are the ones who grew up recording songs on cassette tapes from the radio, yet easily navigate the complexities of modern social media. To everyone else, they seem remarkably adaptable, effortlessly translating the traditional grounded values of older generations into the fast-paced modern digital world. But internally, this unique positioning often creates a quiet, persistent psychological dissonance, a lingering feeling of never quite fitting into any established generational box. This is the exact psychological experience of Xennials, a fascinating microgeneration that constantly feels like they belong to two completely different, conflicting worlds. Society generally loves to categorize people into neat, easily defined generational boxes, contrasting the cynical independence of Generation X with the digital native optimism of millennials. So when you exist precisely in the gap between these two massive cultural forces, you often feel like a permanent translator who lacks a native country. People do not realize that your brain was actually wired during a completely unprecedented historical transition, experiencing two vastly different paradigms of human connection. This misunderstanding often makes you feel slightly alienated in almost every room, subtly out of sync with both the older and the younger adults around you. Refusing to neatly fit into these generational stereotypes is not about being difficult. It is simply a reflection of your deeply hybrid psychological foundation. For those born roughly between the late 70s and the early 80s, an analog childhood meant developing patience, deep focus, and an incredible tolerance for pure boredom. You learned how to navigate your neighborhood without a smartphone, memorize phone numbers, and entertain yourself for hours with absolutely zero digital stimulation. But unlike older generations, you were introduced to the internet just as your young adult brain was forming its most crucial social and professional connections. You quickly learned how to integrate dial-up connections, early chat rooms, and eventually social media into a psyche that was already fully grounded in the physical world. Therefore, when you feel emotionally stretched between a desire to unplug and a need to stay connected, it is because your nervous system holds two competing realities. In psychology, developmental researchers study how the specific technological environment of our formative years permanently shapes our cognitive processing and social attachment patterns. Reports from research organizations like the Pew Research Center show that while millennials are true digital natives, older generations also embrace digital life with Xennials acting as the crucial bridge. Furthermore, sociological studies suggest that growing up across a major technological divide creates a unique psychological profile characterized by high adaptability but a fragmented sense of cultural belonging. When your childhood requires waiting weeks for a letter, but your 20s demand instant email responses, your brain learns to operate at two completely different speeds. Your mind essentially wires a dual processing system, one that deeply values the slow, intentional pace of analog life, and another that thrives on rapid digital efficiency. This constant internal switching creates a strange psychological tension, making you feel both incredibly capable of modern life and deeply nostalgic for a simpler, disconnected past. Additionally, people who grew up this way often developed a remarkable capacity for cognitive flexibility, allowing them to rapidly learn and discard entirely different technological and social paradigms. While younger people might panic without a connection, and older people might actively resist new platforms, your mind naturally assumes that you can simply figure out the new system. This fundamental adaptability makes you an incredibly effective problem solver, but it often leaves you feeling like you are constantly translating your own experiences for everyone else to understand. You are essentially operating on a psychological model of continuous translation, prioritizing the ability to bridge gaps over the comforting, simple safety of a single, unified cultural identity. You can actually feel this generational dissonance in your physical body whenever a situation arises that highlights the stark difference between how you were raised and how you live now. It feels like a sudden, quiet wave of sensory overload when a group chat explodes, mixed with an intense, almost physical craving to just throw your phone into a river. Your nervous system reacts to the constant demands of modern connectivity as if it remembers a time when being unreachable was actually a perfectly acceptable, normal state of being. Imagine the sensation of speaking two different languages fluently but constantly having to switch between them mid-sentence without anyone ever noticing the immense effort it requires. It is not that you cannot handle the digital world. It is that your biological system still remembers the deep restorative quiet of an afternoon completely disconnected from the grid. When someone expects you to be instantly available at all times, you might feel a sudden spike of irritation, a quiet rebellion against the erasure of personal boundaries. Your body physically prepares to defend its right to disconnect, bracing itself against an endless stream of notifications that your childhood brain never evolved to anticipate or manage. Even simple things like managing digital subscriptions or curating a social media profile can trigger a strange physical sense of profound exhaustion and deep lingering artificiality. Research into human behavior confirms that this friction is often a physical stress response to living in an environment that constantly violates the baseline expectations established during our early development. This is why maintaining strict boundaries around your digital life is not just a preference. It is a fundamental biological strategy for a nervous system that knows how to truly rest. This brings us to the crucial shadow side of this wiring. What happens when this constant bridging between worlds starts working against your own emotional well-being? The danger is that you might begin to feel profoundly isolated, assuming that nobody truly understands the specific nuanced pressure of living across this invisible generational divide. You might isolate yourself emotionally from younger colleagues who find you too formal, and from older peers who find you too immersed in the rapidly changing digital landscape. This can lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy where you accelerate your own sense of alienation, quietly resenting both the slow pace of the past and the frenetic speed of the present. You might also find yourself constantly acting as the unofficial emotional and technical translator for your family, turning your relationships into one-sided arrangements, where you are the permanent, exhausted mediator. Because you project such an aura of effortless adaptability, people naturally lean on you to navigate complex changes, completely oblivious to the fact that you are mentally exhausted by the effort. When you never allow yourself to admit that the constant shifting is draining, you deny the people around you the opportunity to actually understand your specific psychological burden. If you automatically accept every demand to adapt, because it feels necessary, you are allowing a deeply ingrained survival mechanism to dictate the pace and peace of your adult life. True emotional resilience is not just about effortlessly translating between generations. It is also knowing how to safely set down the burden of being the universal bridge for everyone else. The goal is not to reject the modern world, but to build enough psychological flexibility to allow yourself moments of genuine, completely analog, unbothered existence without any guilt. So how do you navigate a world that requires constant connectivity when your mind naturally craves the quiet, disconnected safety of your deeply analog childhood memories? It starts with a vital cognitive distinction. You must understand that while your adaptability allowed you to thrive, constantly acting as the generational translator is currently keeping you emotionally exhausted. Acknowledge that your desire to unplug and disappear for a while is entirely valid. If leaving your phone in another room brings you profound peace, enthusiastically embrace it as a necessity. You must also practice taking tiny, low-stakes risks with your boundaries, explicitly communicating your need for analog time in a world that assumes constant digital availability is the default. Instead of waiting until you are completely overwhelmed by notifications, try delegating specific hours of the day to be entirely unreachable and simply allowing others to wait for your response. To counteract the physical resistance to modern demands, intentionally observe what happens when you actually enforce a boundary and prioritize your own need for quiet, disconnected mental space. Give yourself permission to inhabit the analog world again, a deeply restorative process that has absolutely no productive value other than teaching your nervous system that it is finally safe to rest. A simple shift from constantly adapting to the digital world to intentionally carving out protected analog sanctuaries changes everything for an exhausted, fiercely adaptable Xennial nervous system. When the pressure to be the